So, Princess Anne allegedly told Queen Camilla to get out of her room, and the entire thing started because of a lapel pin that an 8-year-old boy was holding on to, like his life depended on it. That's the story. That's the moment. And when you actually look at what was said versus what happened, the official version of that afternoon makes absolutely no sense because the palace didn't confirm a single detail for 2 days. And then the only response they had was that Camilla missed an event due to a scheduling matter. A scheduling matter. That's what they went with. Meanwhile, the pictures from that day are already out there, and if you zoom in on Prince Lou's blazer, you can see exactly what the fight was about. Before we get into the document that proves the rule Camilla was enforcing didn't exist, take a second to subscribe to Crown Front. We break down the stories that the palace hopes everyone forgets by Friday. It helps the channel, and honestly, it keeps me digging through the boring paperwork so you don't have to. So, let's set the scene, because the timing of this is the entire story. It's a private family gathering before a major official function. You've got senior royals in the reception rooms, staff moving through with trays, aides holding folders, and everyone pretending to drink the same glass of warm white wine for 30 minutes while the cars get organized outside. It's the machinery of the monarchy running exactly as it has for 100 years. Nobody argues where anyone can hear them. Disagreements get noted in a private secretary's diary, handled in a side room, and come out the other end as a vague statement about mutual respect. That's the system. And then you have Prince Louis. He's 8 years old. He's the youngest of William and Catherine's 3 children. And unlike the generations before him, he's being raised by 2 people who decided that their kids were going to be allowed to feel things out loud. William and Catherine have been building this wall around their children for years. The kids go to school like normal kids. They get photographed twice a year. They're allowed to say they're tired, they're allowed to say they don't want to, and they're allowed to miss someone they never met. That last part is the key to everything that happened in that drawing room. Diana died in 1997, more than 20 years before Louis C. was even born. He has no memory of her, he never will, and yet, she's in that house every day because William made sure of it. He does it through photographs on side tables, through stories at bedtime, through small objects that belong to her, and have been kept for the exact purpose of being handed down. That's not a press strategy. That's a man who walked behind his mother's coffin at 15 years old, making sure his own children never have to put her away. And on the morning of this event, William gave his youngest son something, a small vintage silver lapel pin. It wasn't from the royal vault. There was no inventory number on it, no curator signing it out of a case. It was a modest silver pin that belonged to Diana in the early 1990s, kept privately by William for years. Now, here's the part I find genuinely interesting. William didn't give it to Louis on a birthday, or at Christmas, or on any date with a meaning attached to it. He gave it to him on an ordinary morning, before a work event, which tells me he wanted it to be ordinary. He wanted the boy to have his grandmother's pen in his pocket, the way any child has their grandmother's something in their pocket. No ceremony, no big speech, just a quiet piece of family continuity. And Louis, being 8, is checking it constantly. He's putting his hand flat against his jacket the way you do when you're carrying something that matters. And you haven't gotten used to having it yet. That's the whole crime. A boy wearing his grandmother's pin inside his own jacket. Then Camilla noticed it, and this is where the story stops being about a lapel pin and starts being about who Camilla chose to speak to. Because William was standing right there, Catherine was standing right there. Either one of them could have been taken aside in 4 seconds. The correction went to the child. She walked straight past both parents and stopped in front of the 8-year-old. She told him the keepsake was not appropriate for a young prince to wear at an official function. She put it in terms of court protocol, formal dress standards, the way things are done. And she said it in front of people, staff with trays, aides with folders, other members of the family standing 6 feet away with drinks in their hands, a small boy being told in front of all of them that something about him was wrong. Then she went further. She insisted the pin be taken off and handed over to palace staff for safekeeping, on the grounds that personal family mementos have no place in a public-facing court environment. Now try to hear this from where the boy was standing. He's 8. Very senior adult. One of the most powerful people in the building, is standing over him telling him that something on his jacket is wrong and has to be taken off him and given to a stranger. He doesn't know what protocol is. He doesn't know what a dress standard is. He knows one thing with total clarity. His dad gave him this that morning, and now somebody wants it. So Louis tried to hold on to it. He explained it the way an 8-year-old explains anything, which is honestly and badly. His father gave it to him. It was his grandmother, Diana's. He wanted to keep it so he could remember her. He told a room full of adults exactly why the object mattered in the plainest language available to him, and it changed nothing. That's the moment it could have ended. One adult in that room saying, "Of course, keep it." Off you go. And this video doesn't exist, and nobody outside the household ever hears a word about it. But Camilla didn't soften. She didn't step back and let the boy's parents handle it quietly in the next room, which is what any of us would have done. She reportedly doubled down, saying palace rules on formal dress were absolute and that individual exceptions were not being made. Think about the arithmetic in that sentence. An absolute rule applied to an 8-year-old over a pin the size of a fingernail in a private room before anyone had even left the building. And honestly, that's the part that gets me. It stopped being about a lapel pin the moment the child told her where it came from. Because after that sentence, everybody in the room knew exactly what was on his jacket and exactly whose it had been. Louis broke. He was frightened by the tone, confused by the pressure, and terrified that the thing his father had trusted him with that morning was about to be taken off him by an adult he couldn't argue with. He closed his fist around the pin, turned, and ran out of the drawing room to find a corner of the corridor where the guests couldn't see him crying. And that's exactly when Princess Anne came around the corner. Those corridors are long and cold, and there's nowhere in them for a small person to hide. He got about halfway down and stopped by a window because there was nowhere else to go. The timing here is the entire story. 10 seconds either way, and this gets smoothed over, handled quietly, buried the way this family has buried 1,000 things. Instead, the Princess Royal walked into a hallway and found her great-nephew with his face in his hands and his shoulders going. She asked him what happened. He told her in the broken-up way. An 8-year-old tells you anything when he's still crying, and she crouched down and waited until he had finished. Then she asked him one more time who had said it. He told her that as well. Now, think about what she was walking into. Her brother's wife, the Queen, a room full of senior aides and family 30 minutes before an official function with the cars already lined up outside. Every instinct that building trains into a person says, you deal with that later quietly through the proper channels. Anne didn't do that. She didn't go and find his mother first. She didn't go and find a member of staff and ask what the situation was. She got the account from the 8-year-old, believed him, and walked back the way he had come. Anne is not a woman who works up to things. There was no diplomatic run-up, no polite inquiry to a member of staff, no request for a private word later. Witnesses describe her walking straight across the room, stopping directly in front of Camilla, and going in with nothing held back at all. How dare you hurt him? Then 2 words that went down the corridor and stopped every conversation in the building. Back off. She told Camilla in front of aides and family that enforcing cold protocol on a child who was carrying a memory of his dead grandmother was not acceptable inside a family, and that it never had been. She said it at normal volume. That's what people who were there keep coming back to. No shouting, no theater. A completely level voice saying the worst sentence anybody in that room had ever heard said out loud. Then she said it again in fewer words, the way she does when she has decided a conversation is finished. Back off. Nobody in that room said a word. The senior aide stopped mid-sentence. And honestly, from everything I've ever read about how that household operates, I don't think a single person in there had ever seen a queen spoken to like that in their working lives. Now, to understand why that landed the way it did, you need to understand what an is inside that building. It has almost nothing to do with rank. Rank is the least of it, and honestly, rank is almost irrelevant in that room. She's the only daughter of Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. She's been working for the crown since before most of the staff in that room were born. The court circular totals for last year put her on 478 official engagements against the king's 532. She's 75 years old and she outworks people half her age, and every member of that household knows it. She also declined the one thing everybody else in that family reaches for. Decades ago, she asked that her own children be given no titles at all. They have none to this day. Think about what that means. She spent her whole life inside an institution built on titles and refused to spend its currency on her own kids. Anne stands up and nothing formal happens at all. The Princess Royal holds no authority whatsoever over a queen, and everybody in that drawing room knew it. But she has 50 years of never once using the family name for her own benefit. And that's why the room went silent instead of arguing back. There's no ambition inside that family for her. None. She's not competing for a role. She's not building a position. She has nothing at all to gain from any argument in any room. So when she stands up, everybody present knows she's not doing it for herself. And that's the most dangerous thing anybody in that institution can be. There's one more piece, and it matters more than the rest of it put together. Anne knew Diana properly. The documentaries never got anywhere near it, and the working relationship between those 2 women was real. 2 people who both understood exactly what that machine does to somebody who doesn't fit its shape. They were never close in the way people imagine, and they understood each other completely. Those 2 things are not in conflict. She watched what that machine did to Diana from a closer distance than almost anybody. She was in the building through all of it. Through the years, the newspapers ran the marriage across their front pages, through the divorce, through the funeral. She never gave an interview about any of it, and she never will. She was not defending a lapel pin in that drawing room. She was standing on a line that had been crossed a long time before that afternoon, and she picked the moment to say so out loud. The story leaves protocol behind entirely at this point because somebody in that household went and checked the paperwork. Somebody under my last video wrote that the royals never break a rule. They decide which rules exist that morning. I haven't been able to get that line out of my head since I started looking at this one because every official function of that kind comes with a dress instruction. Boring document. It goes around the households in advance. It says what the men wear, what the women wear, what the children wear, whether decorations are worn. It exists so nobody turns up wrong. It gets circulated days ahead so that nobody arrives in the wrong thing and gets photographed being the odd one out. Every household gets a copy. Every private secretary reads it. It's the most unglamorous piece of paper in that entire building. And it settles arguments because it's the only thing anybody can point at. Somebody pulled the instruction for that function. There was no rule. I read it twice. I went looking for the sentence that would have justified what happened because I assumed it was in there somewhere and had been badly applied. Nothing in that document said anything about personal keepsakes. Nothing prohibited a child from wearing a family item. Nothing required anything to be handed to staff for safekeeping. The pin broke no dress standard, no protocol, no palace regulation because no such regulation existed for what an 8-year-old wears inside his own jacket. I read that and I had to go back over the sequence twice because it turns the whole afternoon inside out. Every word spoken to that child in that drawing room was built on a rule that did not exist. The absolute palace regulation. The standard that admitted no exceptions. The thing that could not be bent for one 8-year-old. None of it was written down anywhere, because there was nothing to write down. Sit with that for a second because it changes the entire shape of the afternoon. Camilla did not enforce a rule on that little boy. She invented one in the middle of a drawing room and enforced it on the only person in the room who could not check. And once that came out, the question stopped being about dress codes and started being about the pin itself. Nobody has confirmed what was going through Camilla's mind when she saw it, and nobody involved is ever going to. The pin dates from the early 1990s. Diana wore in that period. Camilla was inside that story from the beginning and remembers those years better than almost anybody alive. Nobody has ever confirmed a word of that, and I want to be straight with you that this next part is me reading the sequence rather than quoting anybody. That's my reading of it. She didn't see a dress code violation on that child's blazer. She recognized the thing because a dress code argument has a shape. It's slow. It goes through a private secretary. It gets raised with the parents. It gets settled in a Carter in 30 seconds by two adults who have done it 100 times. This was instant. It went straight past both parents. And it did not stop when the child gave the reason. Think about how much sense that makes of everything else. It explains the speed. It explains why she went to the boy instead of his parents. It explains why she wouldn't step back when he explained where it came from, because the explanation was the problem. Every second that pin stayed on his jacket in a room full of senior royals and staff was a second in which Diana was quietly present at an official function through her grandson. An 8-year-old walked into that room wearing his grandmother, and the woman who spent 30 years living in that woman's shadow reached for a rule that was not there. That's the reason the title of this video promised you. Not a dress code, not a difficult afternoon. A grown woman looked at a small silver pin on a child's blazer, knew exactly what it was and exactly whose it had been, and reached for an authority she did not have to get it off him before the cameras outside could see it. And when the household worked that out over the following days, they went through those corridors faster than any official communication ever has. William got there before any of that surfaced. Staff had gone to find him the moment the boy ran, which tells you something in itself about where the loyalties sit in that building. Not a private secretary, not a duty officer, not the press office. A member of staff saw a child crying and went straight to his father. That's a small thing that tells you an enormous amount about who those people work for in their own heads. He found Louisie standing by a window at the end of the corridor, still shaking, still holding the pin in his palm with his fingers closed over it. William crouched down and let him get the whole thing out at his own pace. He didn't tell his son to be brave about it. He didn't tell him it was a misunderstanding. He let an 8-year-old finish a sentence at his own speed, which took a while because the boy was still crying. Then he stood up and walked into the reception room where Anne and Camilla were still facing each other. And he didn't do the thing every royal is trained to do. He skipped the smoothing over. He skipped a let's all move on and get through the afternoon. He offered nobody in that room a diplomatic exit. The Prince of Wales stood next to his aunt. He said it quietly from what I understand, and he said it to the room rather than to any one person in it, which is somehow worse for everybody standing there. He made it clear to the room that decisions about his children's personal keepsakes and about how his children remember their grandmother belong to him and to Catherine, and to nobody else in that building. No office, no advisor, no senior member of the family has any right to police it. Honestly, if you want one moment that tells you what the next reign looks like, that's it. His father spent 50 years managing situations like that by saying as little as possible. William walked in and drew the line in front of witnesses that Anne finished what she started. She turned back to Camilla and told her to leave the room. She wasn't asking the Princess Royal told the Queen to get out of the drawing room in front of aides, in front of the Prince of Wales, in front of staff who will be telling that story for the rest of their careers. There was no scene. That's what makes it so much worse for her. A room with maybe 15 people in it. Aides holding folders, staff by the door with the car list, her stepson standing beside her sister-in-law, and nobody in that room said a single word in her defense. Not one, not even the people whose job it is to say something in her defense. And Camilla went. The staff outside had to redo the arrangements while she was still in the building. Cars reordered, the line of arrival changed, the name lifted off a list, and the list reprinted. All of it happening in a corridor she had to walk down to get to her own rooms. She did not appear at the function that afternoon. The official line afterwards was a scheduling matter, which is the phrase that household reaches for when there is nothing else available. Her name came off the arrangements. The cars were reorganized and the event went ahead without her, and the king did not reverse a single part of it. Charles arrived into the middle of all of it. Put yourself in his position for a moment, because it's genuinely the worst position in that building. His wife on one side, his sister who has never once backed down from him in 75 years. On the other, his heir standing beside his sister, and a crying grandson somewhere down the corridor. He had about 90 seconds to decide who he was going to be in that corridor, with staff at both ends of it pretending to be busy. Sources close to the household say he listened while Anne said it out with no softening whatsoever. A child had been distressed over an act of remembrance. That was the whole of it, and she said it in about 2 sentences. Charles did not defend his wife. He spent the last few years working harder on his grandchildren than he ever worked on his own children. And everybody around him knows exactly why. He wasn't there for his own boys in the way he wishes he had been, and he's had a long time and a serious illness to think about it. There's no second chance available to him with William and Harry. There is one available with George, Charlotte, and Louis, and he's taken it with both hands. He heard what had been done in his name under his roof at his function, and he understood the size of the mistake immediately. Then he did something the senior courtiers were not expecting at all. Kings do not go and find people. People are brought to kings. There's an entire apparatus in that building designed so that a monarch never has to walk anywhere to speak to anybody. He went around it. The king walked down that hallway himself to find his grandson. No aide sent ahead. No message passed through Catherine. No arrangement made for later. He went and found the boy. And then a 77-year-old monarch, a man who was raised in a system where adults did not do this, got down on the carpet so he could be at eye level with an 8-year-old. His knees are not what they were. There were staff standing at both ends of that corridor watching him do it. He told Louis that loving his grandmother Diana was something to be proud of, that it was never something to hide, and that nobody was taking the pin off him. He put his hand on the boy's shoulder, said it again in the plainest words he had, and walked him back down the corridor to his parents. I've read a lot of stories about that man over the years, and that is the single best thing I've ever heard about him. It also settled the argument permanently. The king kneeling in a corridor to tell a child to keep Diana's pin was an endorsement of everything Anne had said upstairs, delivered without one word of criticism of anybody. Every member of that household understood the message. Family comes before protocol in that house now, and the protocol in question had not even existed. Louis went to that function. He went with his parents. He went in the same blazer, and a pin was on it. Think about what that took. A child who had been crying in a corridor 90 minutes earlier walked out through those doors in front of a wall of photographers with the exact object he had been told to hand over sitting on his chest. Somebody made a decision about that, and I don't think it was the 8-year-old. The photographers outside had no idea what they were looking at. They took the pictures they always take. The family arriving, the children in a row behind their parents, 40 frames a second of an ordinary royal arrival. And in about 9 of those frames, if you look at the boy on the left, there's a small silver pin catching the light on his lapel. Nobody noticed. For 2 days, the pictures went out. They got used small on inside pages. The coverage was about the event, and the pen sat there in the corner of 9 photographs on every picture desk in the country with nobody looking at it. Then the story came out of the household the way these things always come out of the household. The family didn't leak it. Somebody leaked it who had been standing in that drawing room with a tray in their hands, who had watched an 8-year-old cry and who went home that night and told the people at their own kitchen table about it. And the moment it landed, the country lost its mind. That's the thing about family that they still haven't worked out. A constitutional argument does nothing to people. A scheduled dispute does nothing. A child crying over his dead grandmother's keepsake goes through the British public like a current, because everybody watching has either been that child or raised that child or lost that grandmother. The story reached the newsrooms on a Thursday afternoon. By Thursday evening, every picture desk in Britain was going back through the arrival frames from an event they had already filed and forgotten. Every broadcaster went to the same picture. They put it up full screen and zoomed in on that lapel. And once you've seen it, you can't look at that photograph any other way. A little boy at an official function standing where he was told to stand, doing the job with his dead grandmother's pin on his jacket 3 hours after being made to cry over it in a private room. By the second afternoon, the story had stopped being a royal story and turned into a national argument about how grown adults treat children, which is a fight nobody has ever won from Camilla's side of it. The front pages the next morning were brutal. One of them ran the arrival photograph across the whole page with the pin circled and 4 words above it. He kept it on. 4 words in the biggest type that page had over a photograph of a small boy standing very straight next to his mother. Think about how much anger is packed into a headline that's short. No accusation, no adjective, no name villain. 4 words in a circle, and everybody in Britain understood exactly what it meant and exactly who it was about. Phone-in shows ran on it for a week. People rang up to talk about their own grandchildren and their own keepsakes and the things their own mothers left them, and half of them couldn't get through it without their voices going. That's what the palace was up against by day 3. Not a royal correspondent with an opinion. A country talking about its own grandmothers. The reaction split the way you'd expect, and then it stopped splitting. Some of the coverage tried the balanced approach for about a day. The dress standards argument, the difficult position of a step-grandmother, the pressures of an official function. It didn't survive contact with the picture. The country had already decided. And honestly, once the public sees a child crying over a dead woman's keepsake, there's no commentary in the world that can move them off it. And the palace could do nothing with it. There's no statement available for that situation. Confirming it is a disaster. Denying it makes the leak a bigger story. And saying nothing leaves the photograph doing all the talking. They said nothing. The photograph did all the talking. Camilla's diary went quiet. 2 engagements came off at that fortnight. Neither was explained. She appeared beside Charles later that month at something long-standing. Every camera in the room was measuring the space between them. She smiled at the right moments, said the right things, and got through it. And the pictures that ran the next day were not the ones her office would have chosen. There's no recovering a room once the country has decided what it is looking at. William said nothing at all in public, and his silence did more damage than a statement would have. He carried on with the week. He turned up where he was supposed to turn up, and he was photographed with his hand on his son's shoulder at every single one of them. He never mentioned it once. He didn't have to, and said nothing either. And this is the part I keep going back to, because it's the whole woman in one decision. She gave no interview, released nothing, briefed nobody, and never once let the afternoon become a personal defense of Catherine's children or an attack on the Queen. She was photographed the following week, arriving at an engagement in the rain on time alone, doing the 200th of that year. And I keep coming back to that because it's the difference between her and almost everybody else in that institution. The rest of them explain. She never explains, and she's never needed to, because 50 years of turning up in the rain is its own explanation, and the country reads it correctly every time. Inside the palace, the message traveled faster and hit harder. You have to understand how information moves in that building. Nothing gets announced. Nothing gets written down. A thing happens in one room at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 6 o'clock, every dresser, every driver, every private secretary across 3 palaces knows the shape of it, and the version they know is the accurate one. Every member of staff across those households understood what had been established that afternoon. The 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, sit behind a wall now, and the wall is made of family rather than protocol. Nobody senior gets to reach over it. Nobody gets to correct one of those children in a room on a rule they made up 30 seconds earlier. And if somebody tries, the person who arrives is not a press officer. Nobody wrote a policy. Nothing went on paper, and that's exactly why it will hold, because the version everybody in those corridors now carries in their head is a first-hand one, and first-hand beats a memo every time in that building. That's a genuine change in how that institution works. And it happened in about 11 minutes on an ordinary afternoon. And think about who it protects. George is 12. He'll be king one day, and he's already being measured for it by people who have never met him. Charlotte is 11. Louisie is 8. Those three are going to spend their entire lives inside that machine, and the afternoon somebody tried to take a pin off the youngest. One is the afternoon the machine found out where the line is. For William and Catherine, the value of it is hard to overstate. Those two have spent years quietly building a wall around 3 children while carrying everything else that has come at them. And the one thing they cannot do is be in every room at once. Somebody else has to be willing to walk through a door. They've spent years building a home at Forest Lodge on openness, on the children being allowed to feel things out loud, on Diana being a warm presence in the house instead of a subject everybody goes quiet about. Knowing that Anne will come through a door for their children is worth more to them than any protocol ever written down. And for Louisie, the afternoon will not be remembered as the day he cried in the hallway. He'll remember it as the day his great aunt came around the corner, and his father stood next to her, and his grandfather knelt on a carpet to tell him to keep it. 3 generations in 1/4 inside about an hour, all telling the same 8-year-old the same thing. He still has the pen. He wore it that same afternoon in front of the entire country at 8 years old, and nobody has taken it off him since. It sits in a small box in his own room now. And from what I understand, he takes it to things. Not every time, only when he wants to. And Diana is all over that, whether anybody in the building wants to say it out loud or not. She spent her entire time inside that institution being told which parts of herself to put away. Her son has spent his entire adult life making sure nobody does that to his children. And the day somebody tried it, the family closed around the boy in about 4 minutes. There's a version of this family that would have handled it the old way. The pin goes to a member of staff. The boy is told to be a good lad. The afternoon runs on schedule and everybody smiles for the photographers. 25 years ago, that's exactly what would have happened. And the child would have learned the lesson every child in that house used to learn. The institution comes first and your grandmother comes second. 3 generations stood in the corridor and refused. That's what happened that day. And the whole thing turned on a decision. And nobody would have noticed if it had gone the other way. If Anne had walked down a different corridor or arrived 4 minutes later, an 8-year-old hands over a silver pin to a member of staff, dries his face, goes to the function, and learns the lesson the house has been teaching children for 200 years. And the reason the country reacted the way it did has nothing to do with palace politics. Britain looked at that photograph and saw a small boy who had been told to put his grandmother away and had refused with his father's hand on his shoulder and his great aunt somewhere behind him making sure nobody tried it again. That image is going to outlive everybody involved in it. Anne understood something that afternoon that took the rest of them a lot longer to work out. Camilla did not go after a lapel pin. She went after the last thing in that building she has never been able to compete with. And she went after it through an 8-year-old boy because he was the only one small enough to take it from. She lost her place at a royal function inside 2 hours. She lost the room she had spent 30 years being accepted into. And the country worked out why before she finished explaining herself.